Necronomicon, real book or pure fiction, the truth behind the Book of the Dead. They said it was just a story, a made-up book from a horror writer's twisted mind. And yet, copies exist, rituals exist, people believe. What if I told you that the most feared grimoire of all time, the Necronomicon, was never supposed to be real, but somehow became real anyway? This isn't your typical internet legend. This is a book so infamous that even being fictional didn't stop it from spreading across libraries, occult circles, and dark corners of pop culture. Banned in fake libraries, quoted in real rituals, and feared by people who know it's made. Obeying, but still won't touch it. In this video, we're going to rip the cover off the myth. You'll discover how one man created a lie so believable it hijacked reality, and how that lie turned into something far more dangerous than truth. But, fair warning, once you understand the truth behind the Book of the Dead, you won't unsee it. The literary origin of the Necronomicon. Let's get one thing clear. The Necronomicon wasn't discovered in a hidden temple or carved into some forgotten tomb wall. It was typed up by a skinny guy from Rhode Island with chronic anxiety and a wild imagination. H.P. Lovecraft. That's the man who birthed the so-called Book of the Dead, and not with rituals but with ink. He introduced it in a short story back in the 1920s, but he didn't present it like something new. No dramatic flair. It was just there, mentioned like it had always existed, like we were the ones behind. That subtle drop, that's what gave it power. The feeling that something ancient had just slipped between the lines. Lovecraft didn't stop at making the book sound real. He gave it a full backstory. The Necronomicon, he said, was written by Abdul al-Hazred, a mad Arab poet from the 8th century who vanished after unlocking forbidden knowledge. Yeah, totally made up, but it didn't feel like it. The names, the timelines, the fake translations, they all made it look like a historical document buried in real libraries. He referenced non-existent publishers, languages, and banned editions. That kind of world-building tricks the brain. It feels like fact. Lovecraft didn't claim it was real, but he wrote like it was. And readers couldn't help falling into the illusion. People didn't just read about the Necronomicon. They started believing in it. Some thought it was real. Others acted like it might be, just enough to keep digging. That's the genius. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about planting doubt. Once doubt exists, the story lives on. Readers began asking questions. Bookstores got calls. Do you carry the Necronomicon? Libraries got emails. Is there a restricted section? Lovecraft had built a literary ghost, one you couldn't prove was fake because part of you wanted it to be real. And when fiction dances that close to belief, things get blurry fast. Then came the reinforcements. Other writers, friends of Lovecraft, started using the Necronomicon in their own stories, not just referencing it, but expanding it, adding details, building it up like it was common knowledge. Before long, the book had a presence bigger than any single story. It wasn't just Lovecraft's idea anymore. It was a shared myth, a fictional relic treated with real reverence. That collective storytelling gave it weight, and the more it appeared, the harder it was to ignore. It stopped feeling like a gimmick. It started feeling like history, twisted, forbidden history, and history, real or fake, has a way of leaking into the present. People began searching for copies. Some swore they'd seen one. Others said they read part of it and couldn't sleep for days. And then, as if the universe was in on the joke, physical copies started to surface. Leather-bound books, ancient-looking pages, titles etched in symbols. In 1977, a version called the Simon Necronomicon hit the shelves. It had almost nothing to do with Lovecraft's original mythos. But people didn't care. They bought it. They believed in it. Because by then, the idea had already taken root. What Lovecraft accidentally created wasn't just a spooky book. It was a psychological trap, a literary trick that worked because of how badly people want the forbidden to be real. He gave just enough info to spark obsession and then stepped back. No over-explaining, no closing the door. That silence became power. What's more terrifying? Reading the Necronomicon or knowing it might exist, that's the itch it leaves. And for those who fall too deep into the myth, it stops being about fiction. It becomes something personal, something spiritual, sometimes even something dangerous. And the craziest part, that was just the beginning. Lovecraft may have invented the Necronomicon as a piece of fiction, but the world refused to treat it that way. Once the myth escaped the page, people started doing something Lovecraft never saw coming. They tried to make it real. And in the next chapter, that's exactly where we're going, when fiction pretends to be fact and believers start playing along. The effect of fiction disguised as reality. Lovecraft didn't just invent a fake book. He invented a strategy. He wrote fiction that pretended to be history, and people bought into it hard. One of his best tricks? Referencing real locations, alongside fake ones. He'd say the Necronomicon was banned by the Vatican or held in a rare collection at Harvard. Both sound plausible. But neither is true. Still, the brain doesn't care. When you mix just enough truth into a lie, the whole thing feels real. It's like seasoning, too much, and it tastes fake. Just the right amount, it's delicious. That's how Lovecraft trapped us. He blurred the lines so well. People stopped, checking where the fiction ended, and it didn't stop with him. Other writers kept the illusion going. They quoted fake passages from the Necronomicon in their books, invented ancient spells, and even cited page numbers that didn't exist. It was a literary ecosystem. Everyone adding branches to a tree that never had roots. Readers didn't know what was made up anymore. Some didn't care. They just wanted to believe, and that belief over time turned into something stronger. Penn started digging through old manuscripts, trying to find the book. Some claimed to have copies, others warned of its dangers. It wasn't just a story anymore. It became folklore. Here's where things got strange. People began reporting strange experiences after reading so-called editions of the Necronomicon. Nightmares, paranoia, feelings of being watched. Of course, most of it was psychological. The power of suggestion is real, but in a way, that made it more terrifying. If fake magic can mess with your mind, what does that say about the stories we tell ourselves? That's the trap of fiction disguised as reality. It crawls under your skin and makes you question everything, and once you start asking what if, you're already in too deep. The 1977 Simon Necronomicon is a perfect example. It was sold as a real grimoire, drawing from Mesopotamian myths, occult traditions, and Lovecraftian names. It looked ancient, it sounded dangerous, and for many that was enough. Suddenly, the book was showing up in occult stores. Practitioners were performing rituals from its pages, not as role play, as real practice. That's when fiction stopped being entertainment and became a tool. Whether it worked or not didn't matter. What mattered was that people believed it could, and belief in the occult is fuel. What Lovecraft created was now being treated like sacred text. Forums, books, and entire communities sprang up around this thing that started as a spooky prop. And here's the twist. Some people knew it was fictional and still treated it as spiritually valid. Why? Because meaning isn't always about facts. It's about feeling, intention, power. And the Necronomicon, whether real or fake, carried weight. It had presence. It had fear. And fear is one of the most ancient forms of respect. When people fear something, they give it energy. They give it life. That's how myths survive and evolve. You've probably seen it before, a fictional idea taken so seriously it starts changing behavior. That's not new. Religion, conspiracy theories, urban legends, they all start with a story, a seed. Then people water it with belief. The Necronomicon is no different. It's not just a fake book, it's a mirror. It reflects what we crave, what we fear, what we want to believe exists in the dark. That's why it's spread. Not because of facts, but because of feeling. And when feeling is strong enough, fiction becomes folklore. Folklore becomes faith. And once something reaches that point, once it becomes bigger than the truth, there's no putting it back in the box. People begin to use it, invoke it, even protect it. What started as a literary prank turned into a cultural force, a whisper that became a roar. And from that point on, the Necronomicon stopped being a story and started being a tool for something else entirely. But the question is, what happens when that tool gets into the hands of someone who actually believes? Let's talk about that. The Necronomicon and modern occultism. Now here's where things get real, or at least real enough to matter, because at some point the Necronomicon stopped being just a story and started being used in actual rituals. That's right. What began as a fictional grimoire created for creepy tales became a sacred text for some modern occultists. Not just collectors or horror fans, real practitioners. People who believed in energy, symbols, spirits. They started quoting from the book, building entire systems of magic based on it, and many weren't even joking. Whether Lovecraft intended it or not, his myth had been claimed by a community that treats belief as practice and imagination as power. You see, in the world of the occult, belief is a kind of currency. If enough people pour energy into a symbol, a name, a ritual, it begins to resonate. And that's what happened with the Necronomicon. Its references, even if invented, were soaked in dark, ancient energy. Names like Yog-Sothoth, Nyarlathotep, and Cthulhu started being spoken in candle-lit rooms, inside magic circles. The lines blurred completely. Fiction became sacred. Spells based on Necronomicon passages appeared in books, websites, even in secret occult groups. The craziest part? Some people claimed those spells worked, maybe not in a Hollywood way, but in a personal, psychological, spiritual way. And here's a thought that should make your skin crawl. If people believe something odd enough, they can start to experience real effects. That's the principle behind egregores, thought forms created by collective belief. The Necronomicon, in that sense, may have birthed its own egregore. Not Cthulhu crashing through the sky, but a shared psychic presence shaped by decades of fear and fascination. Some occultists began to speak of the book like it had its own will, like reading it, even as fiction, connected you to something else. That's the point where a myth becomes more than just a story. It becomes a tool or a weapon. Of course, not all practitioners agree. Some treat the Necronomicon like symbolic art, a modern myth for modern rituals. They mix it with real grimoires, astrology, chaos magic. Others dismiss it as nonsense, a distraction from true traditions. But even the skeptics can't deny one thing. The Necronomicon opened doors. It brought more people into the occult. People who wouldn't touch the Bible of the Dead or the Key of Solomon suddenly found themselves curious because of this one cursed book. Whether real or fake, it acted like a gateway drug, an invitation to explore the shadows. It also inspired entire groups and orders, some serious, some not so much. There were people forming cults, using Lovecraft's mythos as their cosmology. You'd see forums, manifestos, even rituals live-streamed online. One group tried to summon Nyarlathotep during a lunar eclipse. Another created a full-blown religion around the old ones, treating Lovecraft like a prophet. It sounds insane, and maybe it is, but it proves the point. Belief doesn't need truth. It needs structure, mystery, and a sense of danger. And the Necronomicon offered all three, gift-wrapped in dread. And isn't that exactly what Lovecraft warned us about? That knowledge itself can be a curse, that the thirst for hidden truths could drive someone mad. It's poetic, really. a fake. Book warning us about the dangers of forbidden knowledge becomes a real source of it, like a mirror that shows your own obsession looking back at you. In the hands of a casual reader, it's harmless fiction, but in the hands of someone seeking power, it becomes something else. A map, a code, a key. And we all know what happens when you use the wrong key on the wrong door, but maybe we're asking the wrong question. Maybe it's not about whether the Necronomicon is real or fake. Maybe the real question is this: what makes any book powerful? Is it the words inside or the weight we give them? And if enough people fear a lie, does that lie become real? Because once you step into this world of grimoires and secret knowledge, you start to see patterns. Some books are respected, some are feared, but only one was made up, and still managed to be both. Real grimoires versus the Necronomicon. Let's set the record straight. Real grimoires exist. Books that were actually used in rituals, copied by hand, hidden, banned, and passed through centuries. The Key of Solomon, the Picatrix, the Book of Abramelin. All of them are real historical texts, packed with instructions for invoking angels, demons, spirits, even planetary forces. These weren't bedtime stories. They were tools, manuals of spiritual technology. And unlike the Necronomicon, they weren't trying to scare people. They were trying to control something. Real grimoires had purpose, structure, and tradition behind them. The Necronomicon, that one was built for fear. Still, the comparisons are tempting. The Necronomicon feels like a grimoire. It has a mysterious author, a cursed history, forbidden knowledge, and that irresistible sense of danger. It walks like a duck, quacks like a duck. But it's a mechanical duck built by a horror writer. That's the difference. Where traditional grimoires were part of religious or magical systems, the Necronomicon was designed to unsettle you, to make you question reality, not master it. It doesn't teach you how to bind spirits. It teaches you how small and helpless you are in a chaotic universe. That's cosmic horror, and it's terrifying for a reason. But here's where things twist again. Some occultists argue that the Necronomicon works because it was born from fiction. Chaos magicians in particular believe that belief itself is the engine, not tradition. If you treat the Necronomicon as a symbolic map of the unconscious, it becomes valid in its own way. Instead of angels and demons, you're dealing with archetypes. Cthulhu isn't a literal monster. It's the embodiment of the unknown. Yog-Sothoth isn't a being, it's the gate. Suddenly, you're not reading a story. You're walking through your own fear. And that's powerful. Still, it's dangerous. To pretend they're the same. Real grimoires require discipline, study, and respect for tradition. They're written in Latin, Greek, Hebrew, with layers of theology and philosophy. The Necronomicon, it was never meant to be used. It was meant to haunt, to play tricks on your sense of reality. Mixing it with real practice is like using a movie script to perform surgery. You might survive, but odds aren't great. And yet, people still try. Some blend it with Solomonic magic. Others treat it like a dark gospel. But one truth remains. It's a symbol, not a system. And here's what's really wild. When people compare grimoires, the Necronomicon often ranks among the most feared, even though it's the only one that's fake. Why? Because fear doesn't care about footnotes. The idea of the book is stronger than the content. Nobody's losing sleep over the Picatrix, even though it describes how to summon planetary spirits and craft talismans with animal blood. But mention the Necronomicon? Eyes widen, voices drop. That's storytelling magic at its highest level, when a lie becomes more potent than truth. So maybe what makes a grimoire real isn't about facts at all. Maybe it's about effect, influence, presence, and by that logic, the Necronomicon is one of the most successful grimoires ever created, not because of what it teaches, but because of what it triggers in people. fear, obsession, curiosity, and the desire to know what was never meant to be known. That's the real dark art. Not the spell on the page, but the one in your mind. And once a book can do that to you, who cares if it's real or not? Because here's the thing, a grimoire is only as powerful as the person who opens it. And the moment the Necronomicon made people feel like it held forbidden knowledge, it became dangerous, not in a Hollywood sense, but in the kind of way that lingers, the kind of danger that whispers when the lights are off. And if that whisper spreads far enough, it can shape the very culture we live in. In fact, it already has. The Necronomicon as a pop culture icon and symbol of fear. It's one thing for a fictional book to be scary. It's another thing entirely when that book becomes a global icon. That's exactly what happened with the Necronomicon. What started as a casual name drop in a short story turned into one of the most recognized symbols of fear in modern culture. Movies, TV shows, video games, music, it's everywhere. From The Evil Dead to The Simpsons, the Necronomicon shows up again and again, and every time it brings the same energy, cursed, ancient, and definitely not to be messed with. It's not just a book anymore, it's a warning sign. And let's be honest, pop culture loves fear. It loves that thrill of the forbidden. The Necronomicon delivers that in seconds. It looks old, feels dangerous, and carries the scent of something that was never meant to be read. In horror, it's a perfect tool. Open the book, release the evil. Simple, powerful, unforgettable. That's what makes it so useful. Writers, filmmakers, and artists don't need to explain what it is. The audience already knows. The name alone triggers dread. No exposition needed. That's not just good branding, as that's myth in motion. Even in music, it appears like a dark refrain. Metal bands reference it. Album covers feature it. Lyrics invoke its power. It's become shorthand for chaos, madness, and the occult. But here's what's really wild. Most people who use it in art know it's fictional, and they don't care, because the idea of the Necronomicon is more powerful than its origin. It represents something primal, the fear of knowledge, the seduction of the unknown. That's what makes it timeless. It taps into something deep in us, something older than logic. It's not just horror, it's hunger. Over time, the Necronomicon became more than a symbol of fear. It became a symbol of forbidden power. It's not just a cursed book in a movie anymore. It's a cultural mirror, a reflection of how far people are willing to go to get answers. In a world obsessed with secrets, the Necronomicon plays a special role. It teases you, dares you. It says, "Read me if you're brave enough." And even though we know it's fictional, a small part of us hesitates. That hesitation, that's real. That's power. That's why it never dies. Think about it. How many other fictional books have had this kind of impact? Not many. There's the Death Note, the Book of Shadows from Charmed, maybe the Darkhold in Marvel. But none of them have blurred the line between fiction and belief the way the Necronomicon has. It has its own mythos, its own fan base, its own fake editions sold around the world. It even has people arguing about how to properly use it. That's not just pop culture. That's cultural possession. And like any good possession, it spreads. And here's the part no one talks about. The fear works because it's unspoken. The Necronomicon is rarely read out loud in films. We see it, we hear about it, but we don't know what's inside. That unknown is where the real fear lives. It's the silence between pages, the suggestion that what's written in there is too much for the human mind. That's why it stayed relevant, because fear of the unknown never gets old. It just evolves, and the Necronomicon evolves right with it, taking on new forms, slipping into new stories, always just out of reach. So, at this point, we've seen it move through fiction, belief, ritual, and pop culture. A made-up book that found its way into bookstores, movies, and actual magical practices. But what does that say about us? about what we believe, what we fear, and what we're willing to chase. The Necronomicon may have started on the page, but now it lives in the mind. It's in the collective shadow, and once something enters the shadow, it doesn't leave quietly. So now you know, the Necronomicon, real or fake, doesn't matter as much as what it did to us. It blurred the line. It made us question what we believe, what we fear, and what we're willing to open, just to feel something ancient staring back. But here's the question I want to leave with you. If a fictional book can control minds, inspire rituals, and shape culture, what other lies are we living like truth? What fictions are guiding your choices every day without you even noticing? Maybe it's time to start looking at the books and beliefs and you've been afraid to open. Because sometimes the story isn't just a story. If this made you think deeper, pause longer, or even feel a chill, hit the like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and tell me, do you believe the Necronomicon is just fiction or something more? And if you're into this kind of truth-bending mystery, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon. Because this is just one chapter, and the next one gets darker.